Jordan. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matt Coyne. I am Group Commercial Director for GES. And just going to introduce our panel quickly, if you could tell who you are and where you're from and what you do briefly.
Thank you. My name's Alison Church. I'm Marketing Director for Easy Fares for our UK and Global region.
Good afternoon. My name is Mike Sealy. I'm the Customer Experience Director for Informa Markets.
I'm Ade Allenby from Reed Exhibitions. I'm the Global Head of Digital Innovation.
Thank you. So our session is very much talking about the adoption of technology, or how to increase adoption and optimize the usage maybe of the technology. And we've got then from three quite big organizers, I think, but also with three slightly different crossover type job titles, from the tech to marketing to experience. So hopefully we're going to draw on some of that experience as to what these guys are doing, how they're doing it, and give you a few sort of tips that you can take away from that. So to kick things off, I think it's quite simply, how are we educating participants around using technology? Ade, we talked about in a kind of a time kind of conscious world where people don't have much of it. What ways are you guys doing things to help get people using some of the tech on your events?
Yeah, and I think being on the innovation side, which basically means testing out new products, that's at the sharp end, because you're starting at somewhere, a position where the visitors or exhibitors don't know anything about the tech sometimes, or we're trying to get better engagement for a tech. So you're starting from a position that people maybe don't have much knowledge, but in terms of what you're telling them, you really have to take it into bite-sized chunks, because a lot of people we know don't plan when they come to an event. They turn up at the event and then they look at the floor plan and they look at the directory. So what's the one thing as they walk through the door that they need to know? And when you're giving them a tool, what's the first thing that they need to do to understand how to get value out of it? And then is there a way that you can then give more information as they learn more about the value that they're getting from the tool?
So is there maybe pre-show some specific examples of things you've done? I think there was something with WTM happening actually this week. There were some videos or video type content for exhibitors and visitors?
Well, I mean, I'm a big fan of using webinars before shows to help exhibitors learn about the tools that you're offering and how they can get value out of them, and breaking it down into the different role types. Because remember, you're usually, as an organizer, usually talking to a marketing person who's responsible for delivering the stand, where actually you're going to need to get that information to the salespeople who are working on the stand. So yeah, webinars, how-to videos, recording the webinars and sending them out, anything that's sort of a 5-minute top tips rather than extensive amounts of documents to read.
And Ali, I mean, let's talk about digital interaction. It's all technology, it's all digital. There's actually still a huge human element of human interaction. I know EasyFares do things maybe a little bit differently. Could you just talk us through, maybe for the exhibitor side of things, how you talk to them?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we do a lot that involves technology to try and engage with our exhibitors. Obviously, we're offering them technology, and a lot of that technology gives them an onboarding experience in its own right. But obviously, as with a lot of things, technology is not necessarily always just something that you can say, it's there, go use it, and people understand what it's there for, what the benefits are, why it's there, or even that it's there in the first place. So we do a lot of stuff we do almost a whole marketing campaign around everything we do for exhibitors, including technology, which is obviously we send out emails, we do a lot of printed collateral when we're on site, but we do a lot of engagement with our exhibitors just through calling and explaining stuff. So, and it's not just a one-time call, there's a whole series of calls that we'll do to exhibitors in the run-up to the show, and it's usually onboarding with some of the simple stuff first, and then depending on the point in the campaign that they need to start thinking about things, then we'll have a specific conversation with them about that. So there's a lot of onboarding that we have to do with our exhibitors through just talking them through it, but also then that's obviously training and onboarding that we need to do internally with our own staff.
And so there was something we were talking about on the call in preparation for this, and I think both Ade and Ali it was kind of giving them that like very simple task of the one thing that they need to do, and hope that that then encourages them to do tasks 2 and 3. So when you're kind of doing those calls, is that how you approach it?
Yeah, I mean, we used to, I do remember the days when we used to try and call up an exhibitor and literally talk them through every single possible thing that we're trying to offer them as part of their marketing package. And you just lose people, and people weren't engaging at all. So we've created much more of a system of we call people as soon as they book, because that's when they're most engaged with the show. It's forefront of their mind. They've just committed to spending thousands of pounds. So speak to them at that point. And then at least you've got that contact introduction. They know who you are when you're trying to get hold of them. And that's the time where we try and introduce them to things like, well, this is where you update your profile, upload your logos, the simple stuff that they know that they will get as part of their package. And then throughout the campaign, we'll introduce different things. We do some offline stuff with them as well. And then the on-site stuff is the stuff we'll probably do a little bit closer to the show, so maybe sort of a month to 3 weeks out.
And do you then, in that case, especially when you're looking at new technology that's coming on, do you A/B test in that kind of sense thing of like what works, what gets people to more, like gets more adoption? That could be a potential.
Not in terms of the human approach to it, no, not necessarily. We do a number of A/B tests for things. To be honest, I mean, my team at HQ probably do a lot more of that. So, but yeah, I mean, we'll do sort of ongoing A/B tests throughout campaigns.
And Mike, you're fairly new to the role, but also fairly new to the industry. Is it 5 months?
Yep, it's 5 months.
So in that short space of time, you know, what's your kind of first impression? Like, how do we compare to, say, you know, the outside world? There is a world outside exhibitions. How do we compare to that outside world?
Yeah, well, I've come predominantly from a tech background, so when we talk about the adoption of technology, I think the events industry are really in kind of a catch-up mode right now. Now, when I kind of look at the events industry, over the last 20 years, it's been extremely successful, been very sales and marketing driven. So when you have shows that are highly profitable, making really good margins, the question is, why do they need to change that model, which has been successful for such a long period of time? And I think one of the things that we really do need to start thinking about is the event industry is being disrupted digitally. Customers are actually demanding a lot more value from those shows, and we have to better understand what they're looking for and what their needs are. So I think kind of getting on board with not just technology, but also data to help us get much closer to our customers and increase that level of engagement, we've got to start driving in that direction right now.
And do you see then there is more education coming from, say, exhibition organisers of how to, whatever that might be, exhibit successfully, use the technology successfully? Whereas in the outside world, I mean, if you're going to sign up to a retargeting campaign, you typically don't get a training package to tell you how to do retargeting. So do you see more training or more requirement for training or education?
Yeah, there's most definitely more requirement for training and education and building the overall awareness, you know, particularly in using tech. With any kind of tech, people know how to use certain features or certain functions, but if you kind of look at the complete landscape of features that piece of tech may have, it could bring you to a different level, you know, with your customers and with your overall business journey.
I do think that in some respects, organisers have to try and help their customers help themselves, and to be that sort of marketing and sales consultant almost for them, because you know there's plenty of examples that we see of exhibitors taking lead scanning and then not following up the leads. How can we as organisers use data to help prioritise those leads, or to feed them into their existing systems, or provide systems that can help to take those on to the next step? Because if our customers aren't seeing the value that they're getting from the event, then you know we're not doing our job properly, and they're not going to come back.
So it's much more about the benefit to them as to why they need to do this.
Yeah, and there is some hand-holding to make sure that your customers get the value that they can out of the event. And so part of that is the engagement to say, you know, if you use this tool, you're going to get better meetings, or you're going to get qualified leads, or you're going to understand more about the people that come to your stand. And so making that process as easy as possible to understand, and what the actual people there at the show need to do to make it work is really important.
And in your organisations then, looking at the salespeople a little bit, are they changing? As in, it came from we're selling real estate, there's space to fill and we will fill it. Whereas now with all the proof and all the metrics that we get from any other media, really, that they can get access, as in the customer can get access to in real time, are we actually seeing a shift in salespeople being not just real estate, but actually being that consultative type approach as well?
Yes, definitely. And one of the things that we really try and do, especially when we're bringing in new products, is have kick-off meetings where there is somebody from sales, there is somebody from marketing and operations if there's an on-site kind of delivery element, because we need to make sure there's help available. Do we need some kind of booth on site or desk on site? The salespeople need to be that first point of contact. They don't need to know the detail level of every product, but they need enough to be able to say, have you uploaded your content so that your RFID reader delivers what your latest content, that kind of thing.
So maybe that takes us on to the kind of the next main point, I guess, is gamification and incentivization. We've talked about this quite a few times. People often think of gamification as something that you do maybe in consumer shows, or Boy Scouts of America do to get all the kids doing something in their big camps, for example. But you mentioned a specific example earlier, Ade, that actually certainly myself, I didn't realise that was gamification. Maybe you could just talk through what the simplicity of gamification actually is.
And we sort of commonly think of gamification as getting a badge for something, getting a reward for something, but actually a progress bar is gamification, a percentage complete is gamification. It helps people to understand where they're up to, how much more work they've got to do. I'm very keen that we just give people enough to get them to the next stage. Well, then make sure that that's really clear.
And I think someone's just put a question up of, can we use gamification to increase feedback completion rates? Are you guys using gamification when you're doing your survey type things?
Well, we've been looking at using chatbots because it's a better way of engaging, because you can give little bits of information back as people answer questions. So we've looked at increasing our completion rates through that. So there's a bit of a gamification element in that. Obviously, if you promise people that the form's going to take 5 minutes complete, 10 minutes complete, then it should take that long, hopefully less time. But that in itself is gamification.
I think we tend to use more old-fashioned incentivisation than gamification itself. So things like if you complete this survey, you'll get a reward when you come back to the show next year, whether that's a VIP status or free access to the seminars, or sometimes it's a case of wine or whatever. We try and give something back, or to some kind of draw, rather than. But it's the old-fashioned incentivisation.
And is that mostly on the exhibitor, or is there incentives for a visitor too?
So that's in terms of survey completion, but yeah, we do a lot to create incentives for exhibitors to engage in all the marketing opportunities that they can do in the run-up to the show, whether that's offline or online, or through technology. So we sometimes offer a case of champagne for the exhibitor who brings the most number of visitors to the show. We've done some on-site stuff as well, where we use the Poken technology, as you know. So we've looked at Poken visit. Sorry, we still call it Poken. Sorry, where we look at the number of touches that each exhibitor has, and we've actually created incentives and almost tried to sort of game it in a real life way to get the number of the exhibitor with the most number of touches will receive, again, something, whether it's a case of champagne or another kind of incentive on site.
I was just going to add that I think more and more of our visitors are digital natives, and that will only increase over time. And as an exhibition organizer, we have to think about how we stay aligned to what visitors are looking for and how visitors want to actually engage with our shows going forward. So in terms of kind of driving new technology and trying new things, we have to try and be ahead of that curve going forward in order to kind of maintain that visitor experience over time.
And I mean, we've done gamification here. It was actually the first year, I think, that we rolled out a lot of the touch points and the smart badges, and it was to get people used to using it. So there were, as a practical example for everyone, it was if your badge touched an exhibitor, it was worth, say, 10 points. If it touched a sponsor's wall, it was 50 points. And if you went and did something else, it was another 30 points or something like that. So it's like then that whole leaderboard, it was driving people actually at the end running around the show to get the most points to win the prize of what it was. I think an Amazon Alexa at the time maybe. But so we were using it to encourage people to use this kind of new smart badge and smart technology. Is there another like practical example you could give to people of maybe what you have done or in your past roles as well, Mike?
Well, I was just thinking more about the fact that, I'm changing the subject slightly here, but we have to be a lot more sustainable. So what I actually like about this is that I'm not going to leave the show with a load of brochures and a bag full of goodies that over time I'll probably throw away. So I think, going down this road with smart events and smart badges is the right direction to be taken, just from a sustainable point of view.
But so the incentive is actually the environment, for example. It's not actually a game running around collecting points.
Yeah, but equally, I come back to younger visitors who are a lot more aware and care, or seem to care more about the environment. So again, this is all doing kind of the right things to make sure that we're doing our part as an organiser.
I was just going to say, just back to the question on surveys, there's also the idea of the people filling in the survey are part of a community for an industry. Don't they want to know the answers to the questions? Don't they want to actually understand, well, I'm part of a community that's made up of people with these product interests or, these job roles. So when we do customer panels, obviously we update people on the products that we've asked for feedback on and how we've developed them in line with the suggestions they've made. So there's that kind of involvement element of incentivization as well.
And then maybe there's also tools such as, Glean In. You can see who else is attending. Again, it's another incentive to know if your colleague, your friend, your industry peer or someone like that's attending. That could be another thing driving you to use the technology so you know who else is coming.
I mean, if I can chip in, I think that's a really good example actually of something that is so intuitive. You almost don't have to do anything to promote it. I mean, there are some, we use Glean In as well, and we do some things to point people into trying to use it a little bit more. There are some of the apps that, or the add-on technologies that they offer in terms of pop-ups on the websites and things like that. But for me, that's a really good example of an event technology that you don't have to work really, really, really hard at to get people to engage. And I think there's a very clear benefit for organisers, there's a very clear benefit for the users. And I think the reason I bring that up is because actually, if the benefit is really, really clear from an event technology and you can communicate that really, really easily, then it makes that adoption so much easier. And I do think comes a point sometimes where we use or try to use technology and we're pushing it so hard to get people to adopt. You have to then go back to, well, does it have the value for the end user? And if it doesn't, then why are you using it?
Why is it there in the first place, kind of thing? Which probably brings us on to the next question of who manages that onboarding. I mean, maybe it's internally and externally, and maybe it is with the internal communication and internal training first. You need to get your teams to do it. So we've got three slightly different roles and remits. Who manages that in your organisation? So the internal kind of training, education, adoption.
For us, it's marketing. It's very much led by marketing. As I say, we spend a lot of time on the phone. We do a lot in terms of email communication, collateral to a support. But I think where you can see it maybe, especially with exhibitor technology, where you can see that adoption rate rise more easily is when they're actually engaged from the start by the salespeople. That's sometimes not the easiest part to do because the salespeople aren't as involved in what the technology does, and I think they've got so many things to think about at the point of sale, then maybe trying to talk about the add-ons that people might get it is a little bit difficult. But if you can get the salespeople talking about it at the outset, I think it makes the rest of the process a lot easier.
I was going to say similarly, a lot of it's done through our marketing teams, but there's also our ops teams as well that kind of deliver some of that training and education going forward. And now having a new customer experience team, there are certainly elements that my team will be involved in going forward.
And so it's quite crucial. The ops quite often would have to deploy a lot of this technology on site. We can't forget them in the conversation. Hey.
And it goes back to what I was saying about the kick-off meetings, because you can have a digital person that wants to use a tool because they've seen it and they think, they've bought into it. But if the marketing person isn't behind it and understands, really understands what the benefit is, then, you might as well not bother. And I have had examples where that's been the case, where we've been trying to roll something out. But I think if you've actually made the effort to make it the team's objective and they understand why they're doing it for their customers and include the sales, include the ops in that, then you're starting off on the right footing, and then each team member is looking at their own position thinking, what do I need to do to make that happen, rather than a digital person potentially saying, all right, okay, well, we need to get the salespeople to do this. It's just flipping it around, and if you haven't got that buy-in, then it's very difficult to get something launched successfully.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with that, and I've seen quite a lot of examples where even when the marketeers are quite enthusiastic about trying a new tool, especially when it's a test and we've never really done it before, we don't have any best practice usage or anything like that, even when they're on board, sometimes it's really, really hard to get them to really engage with how to then push it and communicate it. And I think again, that's really comes down to the person internally who's trying to get more event tech adoption, is really making sure that we're training the people, we're investing enough time and effort into ensuring they understand how they can, increase the adoption as much as possible.
Yeah, and timing is a big factor. We had an instance a couple of months back. We were putting a new product onto a show, and the marketing manager just wasn't responding to questions as fast as we needed them to. We were getting really frustrated with it all, and then we found out that the show had really low sales. It was a launch show, so clearly we've got to be mindful of, are you actually giving the people enough time, bearing in mind what else they've got going on.
So there's an element, you talk a lot about the ideal customer profile and the personas of your customers, your exhibitors and your visitors, but maybe actually there's the internal almost audit of those profiles and how they need to be trained.
Yeah, because I think we probably work in a very similar way at Easy Fairs and Read, in terms of if you're going to look at new event technology, you'll test it on a show to start off with, maybe one or two shows, and I think I always try and look at the teams who are most enthusiastic about trying something new, get them to buy into it rather than force it upon anybody, and just also know those people who are probably a bit more organised, maybe just will think through things a little bit more and
rather than forced upon, actually talk to them.
Well, you do often end up going to the same people, and it's kind of like that band camp thing. This one time at Global Gaming Expo we did this, and this other time at Global Gaming Expo we did this. In the US there's a show that just does it.
Thanks for the bank. Right, so we have a few minutes. There's a couple more questions we want to go through, but we'll go through some that you guys have asked as well. Some people are hesitant to download an app that they only need to use once. How can we encourage more people to engage with native apps?
By it being really good and it being described in a really simple way. That's it. So we had an example where a show was suffering from poor navigation, people getting lost and not being able to find their way. It's, I think, a 6-hall show. So we used an interactive map in an event app, and we called it the navigation app. And the first page you opened was the map, and the adoption went up 90%.
I'd say the other thing as well is ensuring that, one, it's easy and simple to use, but also helping to explain what will the visitor get out of actually downloading an app, what's in it for them.
The benefit or the FOMO that we kind of talked about as well, seeing someone else doing it and it being simple and easy to use, the whole point too.
This is something I think I've talked about a lot in a lot of different forums to a lot of different people. I'm not a huge believer in an app where you will download it on site for a day. I'm a much bigger believer in something where if you give people a journey in the run-up to the show, whether it's exhibitor or visitor focused, if there is a value to downloading an app because of something you're already engaged with in the run-up to the show, for example, scheduling meetings or scheduling seminar sessions or whatever, and so they've actually bought into downloading the app before they come, then I think there's a value in it. But otherwise, I'm not a huge believer in one-day apps.
I think also that there is a question of what do you want to do, what benefit are you offering, and what's the best channel to do that. And if downloading an app creates a natural barrier, and that's too much for people to get over before they will do it, then can you deliver it in a web app? Can you deliver it on a web page, or through a different channel?
Yeah,
I mean, and also it's not always a technical solution. Can you print something on the back of the badge that gives people the scheduling information or your meetings or whatever?
Yeah, or like we were talking about yesterday as well, just simple things of chatbots on websites. Have a live chat tool. I want to find out where this is, have someone talking about it. Maybe jumping on to one of the other questions, it would not be a seminar / session / someone being on stage without mentioning Trump, Brexit or GDPR. And I think so spoken a lot about using data for engagement. With GDPR in mind, how do you encourage attendees to feel comfortable sharing data? I think we were in a roundtable yesterday afternoon. There was about, 12, 15 of us or something like that. There was a huge element of trust. You don't read all those terms and conditions when you download a new app or sign up to a new website. You trust that provider. So for me, there's an element of trust, but also then transparency of what you're actually doing, what you as the organizer are doing with that data. Is that sort of same for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to communicate really clearly about what we're going to use people's data for, and also make sure it's really clear that we're not going to use the data for anything beyond what is quite reasonable for whatever it is that they're signing up to. And I think also if there's a value to signing up for something, then people will be a bit more acceptant about it. I know I've probably stopped at putting my data into things where I've actually gone, you know what, I wasn't actually that bothered about this in the first place.
I think also when you're putting data in, you want to know what it's going to be used for. You want to know whether it's safe. A few years ago, the banks started giving out simplified versions of the legalese they sent you, didn't they? And so you'd actually receive something, and then you receive another leaflet that said, what this is actually telling you is we're doing this because of this. I think we need to get something like that.
Are web-based apps a viable alternative for native? I think we kind of answered that. And can event data be crucial to an effective ABM process? I think so. Something else that we actually talked about was with the insight, and it's not just the insight the organizer can get out of the show in terms of knowing who met whom or who went where and that kind of thing. But Alison, you were actually talking about the insight you can get on the use of that technology and maybe then benchmarking in industries and sectors. Are you sort of doing that? Are you getting that kind of information when you're deploying tech?
Yeah, I mean, I think the point I was making was that obviously if you get the analytics and the data behind whatever event technology you're using, it makes it a lot more of a powerful thing for an organizer. And we definitely, I mean, it's a challenge to use all of the data we possibly get, I think, but certainly in terms of the raw data usage of the event technology, whether it's on site or not, is absolutely crucial to understanding how it's working, what the engagement is and what the ROI is.
I think maybe the final bit to close then, what else, there's a number of tech providers here in this whole building. Maybe to finish on, like, what's one tip you would give to an event tech company that could help you when deploying this technology?
I think one of the key things is for them to really try to understand what that tech will do for a customer. You know, what experience will it bring, whether it's an exhibitor or a visitor. I think if they kind of clearly understand that, it helps to kind of get that message across, and hopefully they'll increase the adoption of that particular piece of technology.
Yeah, I was gonna say this. I like this. I was given this leaflet when I was handing my badge. Told me what I needed to know. A quick reference. Obviously, it's creating paper, but it's actually serving a very specific purpose to help you get much more value and understand from the outset of when you walk in, rather than having to explain it to you. So I liked the fact that this was timely, it was efficient, it's got visuals on it. I thought that was a good...
Simple.
Yeah, and I think for me the biggest thing that a supplier can do is provide as much information, training, data, insight as possible. And some of the companies I work with actually come in year on year and train new staff. It's not something that always sits to us, and I think that's amazing support. I think where they're providing things like examples from other clients, that they might have tried something, why don't we try that sort of thing, for me, it really helps the adoption internally and therefore the adoption externally of whatever we're trying to do.
Thank you very much. Ade, Mike, Ali, lots of years of experience between you both. Thank you very much, or between all of you. Thank you very much for sharing all of that. We're, I think, all of us also hanging around for the startup pitch competition, which is maybe 3 o'clock. So if you had any other questions for these guys, I'm sure they wouldn't mind hanging around and answering them for you. So thank you very much. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you.